Hello, you're listening to Talkin Music with Joshua Kirk. On this show, I speak with musicians about albums they've made, their careers, shows they've played, and a range of other topics. My guest is a rock and roll singer, songwriter, and guitarist who's been an acclaimed underground icon for decades, and that is San Francisco's own Chuck Prophet. Chuck and his band, the Mission Express, have been a solid touring act for a long time and recently released a live album, Live in Paris, exclusively on Bandcamp. In this interview, I spoke with Chuck about significant albums in his career, his place in the music industry, the history of his hometown, and his unique approach to songwriting. So without further ado, I hope you all enjoy my interview with Chuck Prophet, my guest, on Talkin' Music with Joshua Kirk. So you've been active as a rock musician, I know, since the mid 1980s, and as of right now, like December 2023, your career has spanned almost 40 years of work. So, how does it feel to have been involved in the music industry for nearly 4 decades?
It doesn't seem like 4 decades. I suppose it feels pretty good. I mean, I still enjoy playing, when I have a great band behind me like I do with the Mission Express, and I still enjoy, writing, and I still get excited about, going into the studio, and so I'm still interested in it. I find it all interesting. And I suppose to wake up and be interested in what you're doing is not so bad.
I bet, because in my research, I was kind of looking up video of performances you've done this year, and yeah, you clearly seem to still be into that sort of thing. Yeah, even this deep into your career. I know in that long running career, your two biggest hits, arguably, have been "Summertime Thing" and "No Other Love," which both come off one of the albums I got behind me, "No Other Love," which came out in 2002. Um, and these songs, I know you and the Mission Express have continued to perform them for a little while. So I'm kind of wondering what these two songs mean to you, since they seem to be two of your most well known.
I've had a couple covers on No Other Love. The first one was with the group known as Heart,
Oh yeah,
Ann and Nancy Wilson, and that was a real thrill for me. And that's something I'm really proud of. Although in my song I sing "Mama, I'm flying," so I address it to Mama. I don't know where that came from. I mean, it just came out of my mouth, but they changed it to "Darling." But when I say "Mama," in a weird way, when I sing that song, to me, it's not necessarily a relationship song. It's more about, my mother, and God and love, and in a all in an interchangeable way. I never really thought of it as a direct person to person love song, and so they just with one word she kind of changed the meaning of it.
oh yeah, and I did notice that like "Summertime Thing" is one that yeah, it is a bit of a staple at your shows. I continue to put that in the set, and yeah, and it was interesting. I have in the background Stevie Simpkins' biography on you, and yeah, and it's so cool hearing stuff about how that's like the closest you ever come to having like a little radio hit there.
Both of those songs you mentioned are interestingly enough, almost three chord songs.
Yeah,
Summertime Thing, it just came out in the summer, and that summer we went out and we played a tour opening for Lucinda Williams,
yeah,
and I was on New West Records at the time, and
mm, yeah.
there was a guy there named Jeff Cook, and he just believed in it and thought that it could do something at radio. And I mean, I'd already made, before I made that record, I might have made, I don't know, you tell me, 5 or 10 records. I don't remember, but I did think that when I signed to New West, I thought, well, I really might think about doing something different, you know, um, and I remember making a demo of that song, "Summertime Thing," and I remember the atmosphere in the studio kind of changing with the musicians, and everybody was kind of wagging their tails, and they were like, "Oh, this song's fun. This song's cool," and people got kind of happy, and it was a very simple song. You know, it's only really three chords, and the chords don't change for the chorus. So yeah, I really was grateful that that happened, and in many ways that prior to that, it was very difficult for us to tour. We might play in Chicago, we might play in Austin, Minneapolis, New York, San Francisco, but it was difficult for us to tour and play in any other markets because we were totally unknown, and so that gave us a little bit of a boost, and yeah, I'm grateful for that.
We are now almost approaching the 20-year anniversary of your 2004 album, Age of Miracles, the follow-up album to No Other Love, and that obviously was released via New West Records on September 7th that year. And I happened to review the album myself on December 28th, 2015. But looking back on this era in your career, what was it like producing and promoting one of your most ambitious records yet?
Well, it was a difficult time for
Yeah,
me, honestly. I think we were all a little bit burned out. It was a difficult record to make.
yeah,
It took a long time. I felt like the band was a little bit burned out from all the touring that we had done behind No Other Love.
yeah,
And Stephanie Finch, who of course is my wife, but she's also my co-conspirator and, you know, collaborator, and she's my rock, you know, and she was a little bit she was suffering a bit of a crisis of faith. And so,
yeah.
you know, I spent a lot of time with the engineer working on that record, playing things myself, and yeah, a lot of isolation making that record.
I mean, I could definitely get that because looking at the liner notes for the album, like the group of musicians kind of vary that one with that one a little more so than on No Other Love. It seems that I will say that it is my personal favorite album of yours, as I feel it is a gorgeous sonic stew of rock, folk, country, funk, and even hip hop that deepens the emotional core and sophisticated nature of your songwriting. But speaking of ambitious albums you've made, I now want to talk about your open love letter to your home of San Francisco, which is 2012's Temple Beautiful. Would you mind elaborating a bit on what this album means to you and the importance of its San Francisco theme?
Well, one of the things that's unique about that record is that I wrote it with my friend Kurt Lipschutz, and we had written in the early days a fair amount, you know, and
Yeah,
and we took about 10 years off from doing anything together.
yeah,
I don't remember why exactly. I mean, we could both probably write a book on all the reasons that we stopped getting along, but you know, uh, he and I agreed to get together here in my office in San Francisco and write some songs, which you know, which basically means sitting down and talking, and you know, maybe getting some music going and
yeah,
shouting at the walls and seeing if we like what we hear
yeah,
coming back at us, and so we wrote some songs. I wouldn't call them like go to the head of the class kind of songs, but we had written some songs, and then we wrote some more songs, and then I went in and I recorded some demos, which is always kind of fun for me because
yeah,
it's a treat to hear myself coming out of the big speakers.
yeah,
And there were a couple songs in that big batch of songs that I felt were uniquely San Francisco songs. And so Kurt and I got together and I pitched the idea. I said, you know, if we took those two songs, got rid of the rest of them,
yeah,
you know, we could have a San Francisco album, and I had just come off writing Real Animal with Alejandro Escovedo, where we wrote the whole record together. It took us like a year.
Yeah.
And I thought, it might take us a while, but we could write a San Francisco record, and that would be
Yeah.
something that we could really breathe some life into. And so we did, and that album's called Temple Beautiful. It's named after a punk rock club that was in a synagogue out on Geary Street here in San Francisco,
Yeah.
where I saw some of my first shows ever, as a teenager, a 15 or 16-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And yeah, that record. It did pretty well. It was a guitar record. We toured a lot behind it. It opened up a lot of places like Spain, where we had gone a few times, but it really started to connect there. And I don't know, it got reviewed on Fresh Air, and it just was a real exciting time. James DePreto had joined the band, and he and I really play well together, and we can harmonize the guitars and do a lot of that, that Thin Lizzy stuff, that's all over that record. And so, yeah,
Oh
it
yeah,
worked
yeah.
out.
From the Willie Mae song, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it was a bit of a boost.
Oh yeah, and definitely in terms of some of the things you write about. I mean, we mentioned Left Hand and the Right Hand. That's about the Mitchell brothers, Jim and Artie, who owned the O'Farrell Theater, which you've called the Carnegie Hall of strip clubs, and then
Yes.
like and then like the and then like the Willie Mae song. Besides obviously the baseball player, you have like everybody from Carol Doda to uh Laughing Sal and Jim Jones as well. Like that punk rock club you mentioned, yeah, it was like the temple for Jim Jones, the cult leader. So yeah, definitely interesting references there. But one of the more powerful songs on the album, I feel like, in terms of its message, is White Knight, Big City, which is about the assassination of Harvey Milk and George Moscone by former supervisor Dan White, that then eventually inspired the violent White Knight riots held by San Francisco's gay community. So how do you think this song holds up in today's political landscape?
I mean, Dan White was a guy who had
Eh,
just just about every screw in his head was loose.
eh,
And the riots were really about the fact that he was let off with manslaughter,
eh,
and with the so-called Twinkie defense, and that upset the community for good reason.
eh,
And so the night that the verdict was announced, there was a people marched from the Castro down Market Street to City Hall, and showed them that they weren't happy about it. So I just walked the other night. That was the anniversary of the assassination of Harvey Milk. And I should also mention, a lot of people leave out the fact that Mayor George Moscone was also assassinated, murdered, in cold
eh,
blood. There was just the other night, we walked from the Harvey Milk Plaza to where his old camera store was on Castro Street, and
mm.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
gone but not forgotten.
As you already kind of alluded to, this album was significant in that it was your biggest tour so far, some of the best reviews you've gotten, and ultimately the most exposure you've ever received. So yeah, can you tell me a little more about your response to this album's performance?
It was a joyride. The band was playing better than ever.
Yeah,
Towards the end of that touring, we got Vicente Rodriguez in the band on drums, along
yeah,
with we'd already had James DePreto on guitar and Kevin T. White on bass, of
yeah,
course, and Stephanie Finch. And we were such a nimble band. There was so much we could do. Um, it was a wonderful time, and I don't know what it takes for all those things to come together. If I knew, I would do it more often.
Kind of staying on that topic, I know that you and the Mission Express also performed the whole album front to back on November 24th, 2013. So as of like a couple weeks ago, like that performance is 10 years old, and you did it with a string section scored and conducted by the producer behind Temple Beautiful, Brad Jones. So what was it like reimagining the album like this, and how do you think it stacks up to the original versions of the songs? Well,
Well, I think it stacks up pretty good. We reimagined it, got the guitars a little bit out of the way,
yeah,
and Brad Jones um, wrote such great arrangements that we performed it, one time at the Great American Music Hall right here in San Francisco, a couple doors down from the Mitchell Brothers
yeah,
Theater.
yeah,
Uh, and we recorded it, and it was a special night. I think it holds up real good. I think people hear the songs in a different way. It gives them a new way into the songs, and in that respect, I felt it was really successful, and a little bit of a tightrope for me to walk as well.
I know your connection to California and sophisticated songwriting also runs deep on another album I have behind me, 2017's Bobby Fuller Died for Your Sins, which you've described as California noir. So can you tell me a little bit about what you mean by that?
Well, California represents so much of it's the golden state,
Yeah,
and it represents so much to people in terms of the dreams, show business, and oftentimes the the contrast between the dream and the reality
yeah,
is where
mm,
the darkness is. And I felt like that was very interesting. I felt that, Bobby Fuller was an interesting guy that some people say committed suicide, and most people say it wasn't possible. So in many ways, his death is a mystery that's never been solved.
yeah,
And I liked his music a lot, and I relate to him because he was a guy from Texas that came out to LA in the 60s, and he was a greaser
yeah,
and a sort of a 50s rock and roller that, was a bit of a Buddy Holly student.
yeah,
And by the time he got out to LA, it was all about the Beach Boys and the Beatles and the Buffalo Springfield and people cutting their hair in bangs
yes,
and he was out of step with the times. And that's something that I relate to because I feel like I've been perennially, out of step with the times.
I have not listened to like everything you've done, but based on just what I've listened to, yeah, I feel like this is the most political kind of album. I thought it was very clever how for in the mausoleum you put in parentheses for Alan Vega, and I kind of found that the reason for that is because yeah, there's a light little homage to suicide there with a riff, and then there's Alan.
Absolutely. Yeah, not enough people pick up on that. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Right on, Joshua.
you recently put out a live album, live in Paris, exclusively on Bandcamp, which documents a show in Paris, France during the tour for Bobby Fuller on November 21st, 2017. So, looking back at this time, what do you remember most vividly and fondly about it?
Well, I remember that tour was a lot of fun. We started in Scandinavia, and I believe the last show was in Paris. And we were touring with a band called Curse of Lono.
Mm,
And, things were just clicking. It was easy going. Um, it was well routed, and the band was playing great. And myself and Stephanie and Vicente and James and Kevin, just couldn't wait to play every night. And it was just somewhat of a magical night. The guy that did sound for us, he
yeah,
recorded the show, and he didn't tell us about it.
mm,
And it was much later that he said, I've got that show documented, and he lived in England, and I said, well, send me over what you got, and I sent it off to Paul Coldery, who had mixed Bobby Fuller. He'd also mixed Night Surfer,
Yeah.
and he's an old friend of mine, and we worked together in a number of different capacities. And he called me up. He said, I got the song up, the first song up, and he says, I think you really got something special here. The guitars sound great, the singing's great. It's just this is a really great recording and a really great performance. And I didn't know what to expect. So I think his enthusiasm went a long way, and I'm really grateful to Paul for doing that.
I know that coming off of doing Temple Beautiful with strings, like Night Surfer is definitely an album where yeah, the strings really were a big part of that whole album for sure. Uh and uh and similarly there, like the guitars kind of take more of a backseat at times. Yeah, and the strings come to the forefront. I mean, guitars still play a prominent role, but maybe just kind of in a different way there.
Well, I think in many ways, Joshua, I think that every record is probably a reaction to the record that came before it,
Yeah,
So as stark as Temple Beautiful was, and you can see how monochromatic Temple Beautiful was even by the cover with it's just black and white,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So to react to that was Night Surfer, and Night Surfer was a lot more glamorous and glammed up and used a lot of glam rock
yeah.
things from my youth, and different ways to tell the stories, I guess.
But in 2023, you and the Mission Express still remain a prolific touring band that plays around the U.S. and Europe. So yeah, I'm kind of wondering what you enjoy most about being on the road, and what improvements would you say you've made along the way?
It's really about that time on the stage, really.
Yeah,
Um, and in many ways, you know, when I'm not touring, I'm getting I'm writing or getting material together for another record, or I'm working on a record, and sometimes getting a record
mm,
to behave or finish the record and get it to co- get the record to cooperate. And by the
mm.
time you get the record made, written the songs and made the record and mixed it and mastered it and gotten the artwork together, sometimes it's just a vacation to get in the van with your friends and
Oh
drive
yeah,
around.
it's been really great to talk to you and have you on my podcast, and glad we could link up. And would you mind letting our listeners know where we can find you on social media?
I assume your listeners like you are pretty smart and can figure it out, but
Yeah,
I give it the college try at the Instagram and Twitter and Facebook,
yeah.
probably Instagram the most these days. But I should also mention, Joshua, that I am happy to be here, and it's a real thrill for artists like myself to know that there's somebody out there who's digging a little bit deeper than you're not just a drive-by interview, that you've done the research, and
Yeah.
that you're interested in the work and where it comes from, and all the people that involved that it takes to do it, and you've done your research, and I just want to say that I appreciate that a lot, and I know other artists do.
Oh yeah.
It goes a long way.
Wonderful to talk to you, and yeah, I hope we get to see each other again.
Thanks again, my brother.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Cheers.
You too. Bye. If you want to learn more about Chuck and check out his records, just check out the link to his website and my reviews of 2 of his albums below in the description. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a nice comment. If you have any suggestions for how I can make future improvements for the show, I'd be glad to hear them. You can also find me at my Facebook and Instagram links down below. Talkin' Music is edited by Louisa Phillips. Thank you to Chuck Prophet for participating, and to you for listening. Have a good day, everyone.